Hello, role-playing people, and today I want to simply tell you the story of one of my characters. Here we go. Ever since she could remember, Julia wanted to be an actress. Born into a branch of Grimaldi recently arrived to the States, Julia grew up with Hollywood movies and the idea that this place is the land of opportunities. She found it strange that her family seemed to age differently than other people, but her father always found one explanation or another, even as they had to move from city to city and school to school, and she didn't think much of it. Julia didn't have many friends, though she was sociable and likable. As the oldest sister, she was always the one to take the blame for the other children in the family, just as she was supposedly the one who would take over the family business should anything happen to father. Julia didn't want any of it. Making and selling wine, investments, real estate. This was not her idea of business. Her idea of business was to be famous and to have people all around the world love her. Then everyone could be her family. But as the years passed and father insisted she put their business first, Julia didn't really have a choice. She learned things as she went along, mostly from her father, by observing the way he talks to people, the way he makes deals, the way he ponders his options and decides on a course of action. As the daughters grew older and her sisters went to college, Julia wanted to take a break from the family and pursue studies herself, but apparently it just wasn't meant to be. The real punch in the face came when her father vanished without a trace, leaving the family to fend for itself and leaving Julia to desperately pick up the pieces of his multiple businesses and affairs while also tending to her mother, who had recently fallen ill. After a few months of grinding herself down trying to make sense of the puzzle that was her father and his dealings, men came for Julia in the middle of the night. The things she saw that night would haunt her for years to come. Though it was uncertain whether it actually had a mouth or a face for that matter, it spoke. It is here Julia understood exactly what her father had been doing all these years, who it was they were making money for, why they had been on the run, and why they will never run again, lest all of them suffer an eternity of torment. While the encounter left her with many, many questions and a constant, unshakable fear, Julia knew what she had to do in order to protect her family. Take her father's place, make money, give them to the strange criminal organization called the Sabbat, and never ever attempt to flee from them again. Well, this last part wasn't really on the menu since Julia, having drank from a silver cup during her meeting with that creature, found herself obsessed with it, the sight of it, the smell of it, its commanding voice. She wanted to do her very best for that monster, though she couldn't understand why. So she worked herself to the bone, handling the family business and tending to her sick mother, while her sisters were away, probably partying on a college campus, and though she did tell them that things are hard and mother is sick, they said they'd send money as soon as possible and didn't really care too much, which was abnormal from her point of view. A part of her hated them, and the other thought that, what if the same monsters Dad worked for got to my sisters as well? At this point, she was so tired and was taking care of herself so little that she regularly ended up in the hospital only to be discharged and get back to work. Her encounters with the monsters had become more regular, and a part of her knew they were taking a special interest in her, but she couldn't say how exactly. Shortly after her mother died, and she buried her mother all alone, without her sisters, she moved out of the city and decided to just make a run for it. Anywhere is better than serving these monsters. After a few successful evasive maneuvers, after a few months of being on the run, all alone, they caught up with her. Unsurprisingly, they were going to kill her. Surprisingly, they were going to bring her back. Julia became a member of the clan of fiends in 1995, having known slavery to the dragons all her life as a revenant. To everyone's surprise, really, she exhibited a preference not for vicissitude, animalism, and auspex, but for her family disciplines, celerity, dominate, and fortitude, the same tools her father and herself made use of when conducting their business. With her spadefuls of soil packed tightly, Julia was moved around the states quite a bit, learning more about the Sabbat and Canaanites in general from her sire's servants. Needless to say, she was completely horrified by the behavior of some kindred, and the idea of being forced to join a pack scared the hell out of her. But that was never the case. Shortly after, a new master would take interest in her, a traveling Priscus by the name Vikos. During their first encounter, it was as if this entity knew everything about her and found her very much to its liking. Few words were exchanged, but Julia was told her desire to be an actress would come true soon. A few nights after arriving at a private location, she found her sire, that Vikos woman, and a staked Canaanite waiting for her. Her sire told her, though belonging to a pack would not be optimal, she will still serve the Sabbat with her gifts. Her lingering humanity and her preference for her family disciplines make her an asset of quite the ability. Then her head felt as if it was going to explode. Memories she can only assume belonged to the staked Canaanite started invading her mind. As that was happening, she lied down on the table without a word and accepted her fate. For a while, though the pain was great, she felt as if she were somewhere else. As she came to her senses, a fiendishly long amount of time later, she knew now the correct way of referring to Canaanites for the foreseeable future is kindred. She knew now she was the Ventrue Elenda Sapkowski. She knew where Elenda's haven was. Well, her haven, her businesses, her sire, her place in the Camarilla. She knew all of that, but she also knew she is Julia Grimaldi, a servant to and of the clan of fiends, a servant to her sire, and a servant to Priscus Vikos. A gifted but ultimately disposable infiltrator. Should Julia prove herself, she would be accepted wholeheartedly in the Sabbat, taken under the wing of Vikos itself, and spared a gruesome death. Should she fail, she would give very little information to the Camarilla. Her sire and Vikos made sure of this as they removed memories of her encounters with the Sabbat from her head, as they removed locations, names, faces. The new Elenda Sapkowski was shipped right back to New York and shaped into a grotesquerie by someone of higher generation than she was, that she may heal the modifications over time. When the Camarilla finally found her, she looked like a living nightmare, but she could speak. She spoke her sire's name, a Ventrue of some repute in New York. She spoke her own name and rank with the Camarilla, and so she was taken away to safety by the ghouls who raided the place. The memories implanted in her head were extremely useful, as she remembered things she'd never really known, and those she could not remember, well, her sire insisted that everyone give her space that she may recover from the immense trauma she suffered. Everyone could tell Julia was less humane, but that is to be expected after what she's been through, they thought. Her aura, which had also been modified by the fiend Vikos, didn't register as untruthful upon scrutiny. After Elenda healed the modifications away, everyone recognized her as the kindred they knew, except for those permanent fangs that some other torturer of lower generation bestowed upon her, that she remembered forever during and even beyond her captivity, that she is not kindred, but a vampire, a Canaanite, a monster. Julia's knowledge of the local Sabbat hideouts lent her even more credit with the Camarilla, as she gave away shovelhead packs of little consequence in the grand scheme of things to further credibility in her disguise. After months of residing within the Camarilla, making her moves ever so slowly so as not to give herself away as a Manchurian, and feeding information back to the Sabbat, Julia found herself increasingly drawn to this sect and their views on morality and humanity. She was, after all, human at heart. The fact that these individuals actually gave a scent about humanity gave her the hope of never having to face those monstrosities of the Sabbat ever again. Residing in Elenda's lovely apartment, being tended to by her caring, if clueless, mortal retainers, keeping her pulse on purchasing and selling property, was more than Julia could ever hope for. This was the humane life she dreamt of living forever. But she knew exactly what she was. She hid the soil of her native land all around unseen little places in her apartment, which was now a fortress of security and alarm systems and cameras. Julia dreaded both the days that she went without sleeping in it, and thus becoming weaker, as well as the days she spent in her private chambers, away from the security cameras and the eyes of her retainers, buried in her earth, feeding on its nourishing energy. Her family was gone, most likely dead, though she very much desired to be human or humane, to live an existence as normal as possible, given the circumstances. Her allegiance was to the Sabbat, and here she was, on Camarilla territory like a snake in the Garden of Eden, waiting to make the move that would make her or break her, for one sect or another. Ever since she could remember, Julia wanted to be an actress. Now, from the Camarilla side of New York, early 1999, looking out her window towards the city, she realizes she will be nothing but an actress for the foreseeable future, playing a character she enjoys a bit too much in a production she never chose to be part of. Thank you very much for listening. This is the backstory and starting point for a Tzimisce character I actually played in a Camarilla game, and everyone but the ST who was in on it thought I was playing a Ventrue till the very end, when I showed them my character sheet. Though the character is absolutely atypical of the Tzimisce, due to the merits I chose and the Revenant family it was part of, the character makes sense. It is perfectly functional in a Camarilla game. It is integrated into the lore, and at least in this case, it really made the players' jaws drop. They were infinitely surprised by who this character actually was. So it goes to show the build can be as exotic as the player wants. What actually matters is, what story does the character tell? Take care, have fun, and don't forget to play.